For the 2026 World Cup, we now know 42 out of the 48 teams that will be participating at the tournament is summer 2026. So right now, I feel like it's only right that we rank each national team that's qualified to the World Cup based on what their ceiling could be at the tournament, and also go over who might potentially flop, beat dark horses, win the tournament, etc. without knowing the groups yet. We'll update these rankings in March when we know every country that's qualified to the World Cup, but for now, let's rank every country that will be participating at the 2026 World Cup so far. Starting off in alphabetical order, let's talk about the Algerian national team first. Now in recent times, Algeria have faced a ton of heartbreak. They failed to qualify to the last two World Cups, with them losing in the last second to Cameroon for the 2022 World Cup qualifiers to knock them out of a chance to play in Qatar, and in the last couple of AFCONs too, they've been very underwhelming. However, since the hiring of new manager Vladimir Petkovic, the old Switzerland manager who managed the Swiss side to beat France at the Euros in one of the biggest upsets in Euros history, that's a throwback, Algeria have been on fire since his hiring. In the World Cup qualifiers, Algeria finished on top of the group by a pretty comfortable margin, despite having decent teams in the qualified group like Guinea and the upcoming Uganda. They did lose one game, and that was to Guinea at home, but besides that, they've won every single game apart from drawing another time, so they've been doing good. And Algeria got some solid pieces on their team too. Riyad Mahrez is still kicking around. Sure, he's not in his prime right now, but he's still an important piece to the side, especially with him being the captain and leader now. Then there's also Mohamed Amoura, who finished as the top goal scorer of the African World Cup qualifiers with 10 goals, beating out Mohamed Salah by 1 goal. They got the talented French-born Feyenoord attacker Haj Moussa, Dortmund fullback Benzemaini, Said Bin Rama, Houssam Aouar, Man City fullback Ryan Nouri, Amine Ghouri, who did just get hit with a long-term injury, but he'll be back for the World Cup most likely. And they even got Zidane's son, Lucas Zidane, in net now if necessary. However, my problems for Algeria is that they're not the most convincing defensively, conceding 8 goals in the 10 games they played, which isn't bad, but it's not the best if they want to go far at the World Cup. We also have to see how they play at the next AFCON, being held in like a month at the time of recording this video. So ranking the African countries is going to be a bit hard due to the AFCON being such a major component on how I think the African sides will perform at the World Cup, especially Algeria, because as I said, they've stunk it up in the past couple of AFCONs. So for me, I think I'm going to put Algeria in the round 16. I was thinking about the round 32, but I think Algeria's attack is more than good enough to carry them to the round 16. However, as I said, we will learn a lot more about Algeria after the AFCON. Let's now move on to the next country on this list alphabetically, and we got the one and only Argentina, who as we all know are the last World Cup champions after they dramatically beat France on penalties after drawing 3-3 in 120 minutes. One of the greatest games of football I've ever seen, and they're also the back-to-back Copa America champions. Scaloni's side is really good, and that hasn't changed for Argentina regarding the last couple of years, because they're still really freaking good. In Copa World Cup qualifiers, Argentina comfortably finished ahead of everybody in first place of these qualifiers, finishing almost 10 points ahead of second place Ecuador despite having 4 losses, and 3 of those losses were Argentina playing away from home in hostile South American environments, which won't really happen in a World Cup in the United States in my opinion. Their one loss at home was all the way back in 2023 where Argentina lost to a red-hot Uruguay side at the time 2-0. A side, by the way, who's been absolute butt cheeks now under Bielsa, so there's that. Not only that, even if you remove Lionel Messi from the picture, we all know his past his prime with him now playing at Inter Miami, even though he's still putting up insane numbers in the MLS, and if you remove Rodrigo de Paul, who decided that he wanted to leave Europe behind to play with his best friend Messi in America, Argentinians in the world are still absolutely balling out. Lautaro Martinez is still the leader at Inter Milan, Julian Alvarez has become one of the best strikers in the world with Atletico Madrid this season, Enzo Fernandez is an absolute stud for Chelsea, McAllister is usually very reliable, although not really this season, he's been kind of mid, Christian Romero is still one of the best center backs in the world in my opinion. New pieces for Argentina like Nico Paz from Como and Mastan Duono from Real Madrid are doing well for their respective clubs too, etc. Argentina is absolutely stacked. Now sadly, they won't be tested that much ahead of the World Cup because their federation is corrupt and will only play booty ass sides for money. Like they literally played Angola as a friendly while other national teams were playing good sides for the World Cup preparation. Even though to be fair, 12 million euros is a lot of money. I can't really blame Argentina for taking that, I can't lie. But still, even with their poor preparation, Argentina are fire. Plus, they're supposed to play Spain and Qatar for the Finalissima, which is about to be absolute cinema. Lamine Yamal versus Lionel Messi, wow, we will be there no matter what.
We will be there. We will be there. We will be there.
So yeah, speaking about Argentina, even if they get clapped 4-0 by Spain in March, my judgment on the team is not going to change. I got Argentina stealing as a World Cup winner, so they'll be in the final section on this tier list. They generally could go back to back, and this time they won't even have the pressure of doing so because they won the World Cup last time. So we're going to see Argentina ball out freely. And Messi, stop acting like you're not going to be playing at the World Cup, buddy. We all know you're going to be there. Be for real. Moving on to the next team on this list, let's talk about the powerhouse from Oceania, who's too good to play in that region, so they moved into Asia. It's Australia. Now Australia are a decent side. They finished second place in their qualifying group, only 4 points behind the group leaders Japan, and only had 1 loss, which was actually the first game of the third round against Bahrain due to an unlucky last minute own goal at home. That's right, despite having the likes of Saudi Arabia and Japan in their group, they didn't lose to a single one of these sides, even beating Japan, even though Japan was playing a B team in that game, but still impressive nevertheless. Not only that, Australia do have some decent pieces in their squad. Last time out at the 2022 World Cup, where despite getting thrashed by France in the first game, a match I was actually at by the way, fun fact, they finished second place in the group and qualified to the round 16, where they almost provided a scare to Argentina as they barely lost 2-1. But back then, they had their young black superstar, qual. However, this time out, he's nowhere to be found. But they found another young black king, and Nestori Irankunda, who's been doing alright for Watford, but he's been doing well for Australia, with him scoring a goal in the recent friendly against Canada away from home to beat the Canadians 1-0. Australia also got some other good players like Fine fullback Jordan Boss, Jackson Irvine, who y'all probably know by now, Matt Ryan of course, Middlebrough's Riley McGree, Lewis Miller, Italian-born and Parma's Alessandro Cercati, their number 10 Hrustic, etc. However, the recent friendlies under new manager Tony Popovich have not gone too well. They lost to the United States 2-1 at home, lost to Venezuela, a side who failed to qualify to the World Cup 1-0, and got battered by Colombia 3-0. Tony Popovich is a very defensive coach while Australia have decent offensive pieces. He just needs to allow Australia to take the shackles off and ball out freely, like Rod Lee did, if you know you know. But judging Australia now, and even looking at the past World Cup history, they don't usually make it that far, with their round 16 appearance last time low-key being a rarity. So with this World Cup being expanded and having a round 32, I'm gonna say that Australia are at least good enough to make it there, but I don't have them going further than that. Sorry. Moving on to the last country that starts with an A, we're gonna go to Austria, a side who qualified for their first World Cup since 1998, so there's that. Now Austria are a pretty decent side, and they qualified for the World Cup in a pretty decent group, consisting of sides such as Romania and Bosnia and Herzegovina, who gave them a scare in the last game to qualify for the World Cup, with them conceding to Bosnia early on in the match. Luckily, Gregoric came up clutch with the equalizer, and this 1-1 draw at home secured Austria an automatic ticket to the World Cup, while sending Bosnia to the playoffs. Austria performed very well in this group too, under manager Ralf Rangnick, with them only conceding 4 goals throughout the entire qualifiers, and only having 1 loss, which was a shock loss to Romania 1-0 away from home. Other than that, they got good results, even beating Bosnia away from home 2-1, which was huge. They also got good pieces on the national team. Arnautovic is still there, David Alba is still there if he can just stay fit, which seems impossible these days, Sabitzer is still balling out, etc. And under manager Ralf Rangnick, anything can happen. I mean, under him, they topped the group at the Euros, consisting of France and Netherlands. So Austria are a team that I'd keep my eye out on. It's a last dance for most of these guys. A lot of their best players are in their early and mid-30s, which is another reason why I'm going to keep my eye out on them too. But for me, I think Austria's ceiling is around the round 16 range, depending on if Rangnick can get these guys to play explosive offensive football like they did at the 2024 Euros. If Rangnick can get the Austrians to do that, they could be a round of 16 team for sure. Finally, moving on from the A letters, we're going to the B's, where we're going to start off with Belgium. Now, Belgium is an interesting side to take a look at right now, in my opinion. If you look at their World Cup qualifying campaign, on the surface, they've seemed to do well. They finished first place in the group, didn't have a single loss, etc. But if you take a closer look, they conceded 7 goals in 8 games, which just shows to me that Belgium are not that good of a defensive unit. Not only that, if you specifically look at their home game in Brussels against Wales, they were 3-0 up, and they capitulated and allowed Wales to come back to 3-3 before Kevin De Bruyne saved Belgium in the 88th minute. But some of the goals they conceded to Wales were so preventable, and that's what scares me about the side. However, going forward, Belgium are spectacular. They won some of their qualifying games with huge margins, like beating Kazakhstan at home 6-0, Liechtenstein at home 7-0, etc. And with some top ballers up there for Belgium, like Romelu Lukaku, of course. He had an awful 2022 World Cup, but he's still a pretty good striker for keeping it real. Kevin De Bruyne, of course, he's getting up there in age and is getting more injury prone, but he's Kevin De Bruyne, you can never count him out. Then there's Van Aken, Charles de Ketelaere, and of course, the one and only Jeremy Doku, who I think is going to have an amazing World Cup with his recent form for Man City and the Belgian national team, of course. So Belgium got a fiery offense, which is why I can see them becoming potential dark horses at the tournament. However, I do have a few question marks about their coach, Rudy Garcia. He hasn't proven to me that he can hang at the top level of football, so let's see what happens with him. But for now, I think I'll put my ceiling for Belgium as the quarterfinals if they can get a semi-favorable draw. But I can definitely see them dropping down to the round 16 if they land a scarier opponent early. Belgium have fallen off from their golden era if we're keeping it a bando. Now let's move on to the most successful country at the FIFA World Cup, with them winning 5, and a nation who has never failed to qualify for a World Cup. It's Brazil. Now Brazil low-key is a tricky side to evaluate. For starters, it's Brazil. You can never really count them out as one of the favorites to win the World Cup. They're the Brazilian national team for crying out loud. But the results of the past 2 years have been iffy to say the least. I mean, just look at their World Cup qualifying campaign. Brazil finished in 5th and almost had as many losses as wins, falling below the likes of Ecuador, Colombia, Uruguay, and tied up points with 6th place Paraguay. In fact, if the World Cup never expanded, Brazil will be going to the Interconfederation playoffs for the first time ever. That's how bad it's been. However, I do think there's been a slight improvement in Brazil's form ever since the legendary Carlo Ancelotti took over, but it hasn't been perfect. There are still quite a few issues with the Brazilian national team. First of all, their fullback situation is absolutely horrendous. Alexandro the Big 2025 is nasty work. Fullbacks have become one of the most important positions in football, and the fact that the fullback position is debated to be the weakest point in Brazil's lineup is not a good look. Also, some of Brazil's superstars have not been performing for the national team. One of the biggest names in that regard is Vinicius Jr. He might have been second in the Ballon d'Or rankings a couple years ago, but this dude barely performs for Brazil. Safe to say he's awful when he puts on that national team shirt. Luckily for Brazil though, Esteval has stepped up in recent games, and although the B team of Brazil did lose to Japan 3-2 recently, they slapped out South Korea in Seoul 5-0, and then against Senegal they won 2-0, largely thanks to Esteval's goal, and then the match against Tunisia, although it was a 1-1 draw, Esteval stepped up for the penalty ahead ahead of the likes of Vinicius and Rodrigo, which just shows his value for the team. However, for me, if Brazil want to win the World Cup, they can't just rely on Esteval. They need someone with more experience, more aura. That's right, Ancelotti needs to recall Neymar to the Brazilian national team. It's been too long without him. Brazil are not going to do shit at the World Cup without my idol Neymar. He has to be there, and if he isn't, I will be hate watching Brazil in summer 2026. I do not care, bro. Bring me Neymar, Ancelotti. Bring him to me. So yeah, for now, I want to put Brazil in the semi-final category as their ceiling. Unless they fix their issues or call him Neymar, I can't say they're a finalist at the competition or even a top 5 national team to win it all. But you never know. They won the 1994 World Cup and later the 2002 World Cup after being poor and not being named as one of the favorites beforehand. So Brazil might actually win their 6th. You never know. Moving on to the next national team now, we're gonna go with the debutants from Africa, Cape Verde or Cabo Verde. But for the sake of the video, I'm gonna call them Cape Verde. And Cape Verde are special, man. And I ain't talking about the ladies, because if you've been watching me for a while, you would know what I think about them. They're special, alright. I might be Cape Verde's biggest fan, real talk. I gotta go to one of the Cape Verde games of the World Cup and shoot my shot, if you know what I'm saying. Hey, mamacita.
The hell was that?
Anyways, Cape Verde are the 3rd smallest nation to qualify for the World Cup, and they had an amazing World Cup qualifying campaign, where despite being in the group with African powerhouses historically Cameroon, the upcoming Libya, and even Angola too, Cape Verde managed to top the group with a grand total of 23 points and only suffering 1 loss. Additionally, Cape Verde somehow managed to beat Cameroon at home when it mattered most 1-0, which essentially helped them progress through to the 2026 World Cup, where they'll be making their debut. And the Cape Verde story is special. It only feels like a couple years ago with the last AFCON is when they made their breakthrough to the mainstream, but now to see the Blue Sharks to the World Cup will be special. But despite their amazing story, the truth of the matter is, Cape Verde is going to be one of the relatively weaker / unknown sides at the tournament, and we won't know how they're going to perform in the AFCON to get a better glimpse at the side, because well, they failed to qualify for the AFCON, so there's that. Now Cape Verde do have some dogs on their squad. They got Roberto Lopez in the back, who plays for Shamrock Rovers, who was actually recruited to play for Cape Verde through LinkedIn, so that's a first. Then there's a Villarreal center back, Logan Costa, who's been out for a few months due to injury, but I'm sure he'll be back in time for the World Cup. Then there's Gary Rodriguez from Olympiacos, the dual national down on Livramento, and their most capped player in history who made his debut for Cape Verde all the way back in 2010, Ryan Mendes. Seeing these guys at the World Cup is going to be surreal, but as I alluded to, it's going to be difficult to see Cape Verde go far in the World Cup, unless a miracle happens, of course. They're a top 4 side, so it's inevitable that they'll probably get a pretty difficult group. So although I do want to see Cape Verde do well, unless they get grouped with the USA, I think Cape Verde's ceiling is the group stages, but I would not be surprised if they're one of the best 3rd place teams or something like that and make the round 32. Regardless, Cape Verdeans know that I'm a big fan of them. Maybe for reasons outside of football, but a fan nevertheless. Now let's talk about one of the hosts of the World Cup, and the first host that we're going to talk about is Canada. In 2024, Canada were at an all-time high, making it all the way to the semifinals of the Copa America, even though the route to the semis was easy as hell. And under new manager at the time, Jesse Marsh, who felt betrayed by the United States for overlooking him and rehiring Greg Berhalter instead, they've looked great under him for the most part. However, 2025 has been a little bit of a different story. Canada do not look as good as they once did, and although they are suffering a ton of injuries lately, with Alphonso Davies being out since March 2025, and Moise Barbito continuously getting serious injuries while over at LGC Nice, they're not getting the positive results. Because although they are beating the likes of Romania 3-0, Wales 1-0, and Venezuela 2-0, against other teams they have not been looking the best. They lost to Mexico in the Nations League semi-final, drew to Curaçao 1-1, got knocked out by Guatemala in the Gold Cup quarterfinals, lost to Australia at home, etc. Canada needs to begin giving Promise David some more starts, because he might be the most clinical striker in the pool. Because right now, Kyle Larin is obviously not cutting it, and neither is Jonathan David, who is currently having a poor season at Juventus right now. Then although Teja Buchanan is looking like a baller for Villarreal and Canada sometimes, he has a kryptonite, and that's if you close down space on him quickly, he can't really do much offensively. So with all that being said, with Canada having clear ceilings on their play, it's kind of hard to say that they're going to make an underdog run. They are a pot 1 side, so their ceiling is definitely not the group stages, because they're definitely going to make it out of there, but I would say the round 32. Maybe that's a hater take and I'm biased as a USA fan, but I don't think Canada has what it takes to go further than that. That might be a hot take, I don't know, but it's my take, so sorry Canadians, y'all are in the round 32. At least you guys will probably get your first one at the World Cup, unlike last time back in 2022, so there's that. Let's now move on from those guys and talk about one of the hardest national teams both on and off the pitch, if you're catching my drift. We got the Colombian national team, and man, Colombia's looking damn good right now. They might have failed to qualify for the 2022 World Cup, but they made sure that wouldn't happen again for the 2026 cycle, as they finished 3rd place in the Colombo World Cup qualifiers. And that's with them having a midlife crisis of being absolutely mid and losing games that they shouldn't have. But ever since they incorporated Luis Suarez in their lineup instead of Jean Laurent, and no, I'm not talking about the legendary Uruguayan striker, I'm talking about the next Suarez for Colombia, this nation has been on fire. They beat Venezuela 6-3 away from home in a must-win game for Venezuela, slapped out Mexico 4-0, you absolutely love to see it, drew to Canada 0-0, beat New Zealand 2-1, and then slapped out Australia 3-0 most recently. Seems like Nestor Araujo has got the Colombians back in their groove again. Additionally, they got some top players. James Rodriguez is about to play his last World Cup, and he's been on fire for Colombia in the past year or so. Luis Suarez, as I mentioned before, is good for the national team. Richard Rios is hella sexy, and yeah, that's what I got. And Luis Diaz is absolutely on fire for Bayern Munich. It seems like the large amount of money they spent on him is working out. While Liverpool, we are absolutely booty cheeks. Diaz, come back, bro. We miss you. But man, Colombia is looking very scary right now. And I'm gonna have an absolutely bold take in this video. But I got Colombia's ceiling as the semifinals. I know that's absolutely insane. From failing to qualify beforehand to making the semifinals, but Colombia is one of the best national teams in the world right now in current form. Top 5, I would say. So I can see Colombia being the dark horse of the 2026 World Cup. Maybe I'm being a bit biased because I like Colombia for off the pitch reasons. If you know, you know. I gotta make my way out there for the Colombia games, if you know what I mean. But truthfully, Colombia are good, and that's why I have their ceiling hella up high. So yeah. Moving on from that, let's now talk about an African country playing at their first World Cup since 2014. We got the Ivory Coast, also known as Côte d'Ivoire. The Ivory Coast have been an incredible national team for the past 2 years. In January 2024, they did what seemed like to be the impossible after almost getting eliminated in the group stages of the AFCON, and also firing their coach mid-tournament because they went on to win the AFCON that they were hosting by beating Nigeria in the final. And in the African World Cup qualifiers, they finished on top of a very difficult group consisting of good sides like Gabon and Gambia. And they managed to do this by being undefeated while scoring 25 goals in 10 games and conceding 0 goals throughout the entire of qualifying. That is an absolutely amazing record. Not many people are taking note of that regarding Ivory Coast right now. They've been balling recently. Also, their squad has some pretty good players on it too. They got Evan Gossan, Ibrahim Sangare, Odilon Kosunu, Yandi Omande, who plays youth football in the United States. I wish there was a chance that he represented us instead. Frank Kessie, Sebastian Aller, Amad Diallo, Seko Fofana, Simon Adingra, Wilfred Singo, Nicholas Pepe, of course. He's dating Deanna Trump and might actually marry her. That's actually wild, etc. Ivory Coast have got a good squad. And under manager Emir Safé, maybe they can do something special. And by special, I mean getting out of their group. Look, I'm giving my flowers to Ivory Coast right now, but I don't want to give my entire batch of flowers just yet. I want to see how they look at the AFCON later this year before I do that, and see whether they can make another deep run like they did last time, or whether it was host country buff, if you know what I'm saying. So for me, I think Ivory Coast ceiling is going to be the round 16. I can bump them up later though if I see they do well at the AFCON, but for now, I don't think they're going to be the African side that's going to make a deep run at the World Cup. I think that's going to be another country that we'll get to later. But hey, at least I got Ivory Coast getting out of their group this time, something that their previous golden generation failed to do at 3 consecutive World Cups. That's crazy. Let's now move on to the country that has had 2 successful World Cups back to back, making the final in 2018 and finishing 3rd place in 2022. We've got Croatia. Now, whenever it comes to the World Cup recently, Croatia randomly decides to lock in. They're fraudulent during the Euros. In fact, I remember saying on my Euro 2024 prediction video that Croatia will fail to make it out of the group, and the entire comment section roasted me for my take, only for me to be right after the group stages of the Euros ended. Common W Nabhuto take. I told y'all, man, I'm not Jinx Buto no more. I'm beating the allegations. But yeah, as I said, when it's World Cup time, Croatia comes alive. And in the World Cup qualifiers, this seemed to be the case too. That's because in those qualifiers, despite being in a group with the Czech Republic, who are alright, Croatia finished on top of the group, scoring 26 goals, only conceding 4, and going undefeated, winning 7 out of the 8 games as well. They also slapped the hell out of the Czech Republic one time 5-1. So the Croatians are looking like they're on a mission, and Croatia are having some sort of a last dance for their players too. This is definitely Luka Modric's last World Cup. His 5th one too, by the way. But like, he's already 41 years old. There's no way he can play another one when he's 45, right? There's just no way. Then there's Perisic, who's probably playing at his last World Cup too. Kramaric as well, etc. So Croatia will be a fun watch this 2026 summer and see some of these players on the mainstream media for the last time, I suppose. However, I will admit to y'all, if you guys don't know already, I am a Croatia hater. That's right, the cat's out of the bag. I am Croatia's biggest op. I know one of my great buddies on YouTube, Izak, is a massive Croatia fan, and he's also the person that inspired the creation of this video. So go and show him some love if you haven't already. But he knows, and now y'all know, that I'm not a Croatia fan. Nothing against the Croatia people. It's just that y'all knocked out my idol Neymar at the last World Cup when he should have won that quarterfinals if his team didn't let him down. He scored that amazing golazo and still got knocked out. I simply cannot stand for that. And y'all also knocked out my other national team, Japan, in the round 16 too. Y'all turned me into a hater, and now my ranking is gonna reflect that because I'm putting Croatia in the quarterfinals. That's right, I know how Croatia performed well in the previous tournaments, but I don't think they're gonna perform that great in this one, and I got their ceiling in the quarterfinal. I'm a hater, man. I gotta play my role, so business is business. Sorry Croatia and sorry Izak, but I gotta do what I gotta do. Now moving on to the last 3 countries on this list, we got Curaçao, who are now gonna be making their debuts in the World Cup as the smallest nation ever to qualify for the tournament. Massive congratulations to Curaçao, man. They deserve a special moment like this, and I'm glad they qualified to the tournament over those frauds Jamaica, man. Those guys are just so inconsistent that it pisses me off, and I'm glad Curaçao somehow qualified over them in the CONCACAF World Cup qualifiers. All Jamaica had to do was beat Curaçao in the last match in Kingston to make the World Cup, and they failed to do that. So Curaçao definitely deserves to be here. But listen, I can analyze Curaçao more deeply and talk about their players and potential Dutch dual nationals that they can recruit, but the truth is, Curaçao's just here for the vibes. They got to the World Cup, and that's job done for them. They're gonna be enjoying the beaches of Los Angeles, the bright lights of New York, the vibes of Miami, in and out in California if they get grouped to play there, etc. Football? Nah, man. Curaçao's gonna be chilling while they're over here, which is why I got their ceiling at the group stages. Sorry, but that's just the truth. Now I think it's time we move on to the international team that debatably has the greatest defense on the planet. It's Ecuador. Now, Ecuador were phenomenal in the Colombia World Cup qualifiers, with them finishing second place in the standings despite having a -3 points deduction in the beginning, with them only conceding 5 goals throughout the entire qualifiers and only losing twice, the least amount in both categories across all of South America. And I mean, that defense is solid, man.
Hey, I'm solid. I'm solid, nigga.
They got the Champions League winning center back Pacho in the back there, young stud Ordonez, and Copies in the back too, and Stupid is back there, and Moises Caicedo is covering from the midfield. That defense is looking sturdy, bruh. However, offensively, Ecuador are absolutely horrendous. Those guys cannot score a goal for the life of them. Most of Ecuador's matches either end up with them scoring a singular goal or a 0-0 draw. It rarely differs from that. They're literally Enter Valencia and Inshallah when it comes to their offense. If only Gonzalo Plata actually panned out, then they probably would have been chilling. But he got consumed by the life of partying and women, and shit, I can't really blame him. I bet he gets hella bad bitches. But still though, even with the young super talent Kenji Pais, these guys are so bad offensively. Although they beat New Zealand most recently by scoring more than 1 goal in a 2-0 win, the last time they scored more than 1 goal in a match was 8 games beforehand in their match against Venezuela where they won 2-1. Besides that, they drew to Chile 0-0, drew to Brazil at home 0-0, drew to Peru 0-0, drew to Paraguay 0-0, beat Argentina 1-0, which is a great result, but then drew to USA 1-1, drew to Mexico 1-1, and drew to 10 men Canada who were playing down a man for 85 minutes 0-0. I told y'all, man, offensively, Ecuador is absolutely dead. However, defenses win championships, so I can still see them going decently far with that defense locking it down. But the thing is, you still gotta score goals here or there. So unless I see any improvement, I'm putting Ecuador as a round 16 ceiling. I was tempted to put them in the quarterfinal section, but I need to see a little bit more offensively to put them there. Maybe we'll see them turn up in the March window and then I'll bump them up in the updated video. Who knows? But for now, I got their ceiling in the round 16. Let's now move on to probably my favorite African country on this list just because my Liverpool GOAT Mohamed Salah plays for them. It's Egypt. Now Egypt is a side that could be decently high up on my tier list or very low, because honestly, I don't really know what to think of them just yet. If you guys look at how they played in the African World Cup qualifiers, they did very well, with them topping the group, which allowed them to get an automatic ticket to the World Cup, which is well deserved after the last qualification cycle where Egypt lost on penalties to Senegal to miss out on the World Cup, where Salah's face was lit up with lasers, and in this cycle they went undefeated, scored 20 goals in 10 games, and only conceded 2 goals. So on the surface, Egypt looks great, phenomenal even. But if you take a closer look, their toughest opponent in this group was Burkina Faso, which is like an okay side for CAF standards, but overall, their bootiness levels are closer to Djibouti than Egypt if you're catching my drift. Egypt's national team reminds me of that horse meat. Their attack is wonderful, they got one of the best overall players in the world in Mohamed Salah, Liverpool legend of course, the next upcoming Egyptian great Omar Marmoush, who plays for Man City, then there's also Imam Ashur, Mustafa Mohammed, etc. However, once you go from the attack, just like the horse, the midfield is mid, no pun intended, and the defense is also mid. So yeah, they're not one of the worst sides in the world, but they're not that great either. Egypt purely relied on their offense to qualify for the World Cup, and it worked because their group was so weak. But in the World Cup, I'm not sure if just relying on their offense is going to take you far. However, before I judge Egypt too harshly, I do want to see how they perform with the AFCON and whether manager Hossam Hassan adjusts tactically to show more of Egypt's flexibility in how they perform. So for now, I would say Egypt's ceiling is around 32. Remember, Egypt has never won a game at a World Cup before, so if they make the round 32, that means they've won a game, which is already more than good enough. But for me, Egypt can go up and down on this tier list depending on how they perform in the AFCON in Morocco later this year. Moving on to an absolute powerhouse in international football, we of course got England. Now what do I even say about England? They're objectively just a really good footballing side. If you look at the qualifiers, they were the first team in Europe to qualify for the 2026 World Cup, and they did so perfectly, with them winning 8 out of the 8 games, losing 0 games, and not even conceding a single goal while scoring 22 of their own. It was a perfect display in qualifying, like I said. There were some initial question marks over the hiring of foreign manager Thomas Tuchel, but he seems to be the right man for the job, with him coaching England to a 5-0 win over Serbia, a 5-0 win over Latvia, a 2-0 win over Serbia, and a 2-0 win away to Albania in the last 4 games. And yes, although some of his squad selections have been questioned, like only calling on Jude Bellingham in the most recent November window, and not calling in Trent Alexander-Arnold at all as of right now, he's getting the results, so it's kind of hard to question him. Also, England's squad is so stacked. I can go on and name their entire roster of quality players, but just to name a few, we of course got Jude Bellingham, Cole Palmer, Harry Kane up top, Mark Gahey at the back, etc. England are stacked, and there's no reason why they can't win the 2026 World Cup, which is why I'm putting them at the same tier list ranking as Argentina on my tier list. Now, do I want England to win the World Cup? Of course not. Imagine England winning their second World Cup and their first international trophy since 1966 on United States soil, after everything we've done to them, like the Boston Tea Party, and us coming back after England blew a 13 colony lead against us. This would be the worst thing in the world to happen to us Americans. So I hope England doesn't win the World Cup. It can definitely happen. Another side that could definitely go on and win the World Cup has to be France, and these guys are also such an incredible side. They got through qualifying pretty much with ease, with them finishing first place obviously while remaining undefeated undefeated and only conceding 4 goals while scoring 16 in just 6 games alone. And in the most recent qualifying games too, where the French already knew that they were going to the World Cup, they still smoked Ukraine 4-0 and beat Azerbaijan away from home 3-1, which just kind of shows how talented these guys are. I mean, all of us know how talented France are. After all, they are the same side that won the World Cup back in 2018 and beat the World Cup curse to make the final in 2022 before losing in the penalty shootout to Argentina. Kylian Mbappe almost went back-to-back in World Cups. You know how insane that is? One thing to note though about France is that this will be Didier Deschamps' last tournament in charge of France, which is kind of sad after everything he's done for French football. But to be honest, I think it's about time he goes. I think his football is a little too defensive for my liking, especially recently. That performance at the Euros was horrendous. I was so happy that Spain ended up defeating them with beautiful football because the French football at the tournament was disgusting. Also, I'm kind of hyped for Zinedine Zidane to take over as French manager. That would be cinema. But anyways, at the 2026 World Cup, France are stacked. I'm not going to name their entire roster, but they got Mbappe, Ryan Cherki, Hugo Ekitike, Bradley Barcola, Ousmane Dembele, the recent Ballon d'Or winner, Chouameni, Camavinga, Mike Maignan, Mateta, Olise, and N'Golo Kante still, potentially Pogba coming back if he balls out more for Monaco, etc. They are so good, man. Which is why I also got them in the final tier of my rankings. They have a very good chance of winning the World Cup next summer, which is why I have their ceiling very high. On to the next country on this list, we got the 4-time World Cup champions Germany to talk about. And their qualifying campaign was okay to say the least. They started off qualifying with a huge scare, with them losing their first away game in World Cup qualifying ever to Slovakia 2-0. But after that, Germany won 5 straight, including absolutely destroying Slovakia 6-0 in the last game of qualifying to top the group, scoring 16 goals in 6 games and only conceding 3. It finally seems like Julian Nagelsmann has got this German team clicking. And remember, they can still improve too, because Jamal Musiala, Germany's most talented player in my eyes, still has not come back from injury. So Germany are going to get that XP boost with his return. Besides that though, Germany still look quite good. Florian Wirtz is absolutely balling out with his country. Gnabry and Leroy Sané look good when they put on that Germany jersey. Kimmich is still an absolute stud. The Germans also found their number 1 striker in Wout Weghorst. He has to start there. Nobody else is as good as him for Germany, etc. So for me, I think I'm going to put Germany as a semi-final ceiling. I do think they're quite good, but they're not at the 2014 level, which is why I don't have them in the highest ranking with Argentina, England, and France. Germany could get there, but a lot of things would have to go their way. So I'm going to play it a bit safe with them and say that their ceiling is the semi-finals. So there's that. Let's now go back to Africa and talk about Ghana. And I don't really want to put too many of my stocks in the Ghana national team. I'm not going to hold you. That's because although yes, Ghana do have some very talented players like an Iñaki Williams up top, or even Jordan Ayew who balled out in the qualifiers, Semenyo on the wing, Mohamed Kudus of course, how could we forget about him, and maybe even some new recruits such as Eddie Nketiah and Callum Hudson-Odoi if those actually end up happening. And yes, although Ghana did have a great qualifying campaign where they topped their qualifying group despite having Madagascar and Mali in their group, with them only losing once and only conceding 6 goals in 10 games, I still have my doubts with Ghana. I won't be fooled by them because in the last 2 AFCONs, they completely failed to get out of their group. And the same could be said with their performances at the last 2 World Cups where they failed to get out of the groups in those 2. Not only that, unlike some other African sides at the World Cup besides Cape Verde, Ghana failed to qualify for the AFCON, which I think will hurt this side as they won't be able to test out new players or find out what their best starting 11 is until March when the friendlies arrive. Missing out on the AFCON is something that I think will hurt Cape Verde, so I do have to say the same thing for Ghana. And like I said, recent history-wise, Ghana failed to do anything at the tournaments. They didn't even perform well in their recent friendlies too, against non-African sides. They lost to South Korea and Japan before that. So I would love to be proven wrong, but due to this, I'm putting Ghana in the group stage phase for their ceiling. Maybe I'm still a bit biased after what Ghana did to my country back in the 2010 World Cup, but the truth is, I'm just not convinced by Ghana. Sorry. I think it's now time to move on to the next team at the World Cup, where we're surprisingly going to talk about Haiti, who qualified for the first World Cup in remarkable fashion since 1974. You heard me correctly. Haiti qualified for the World Cup. Despite being in a group with the likes of Costa Rica, Honduras, and Nicaragua, Haiti got a very important win at home against Costa Rica in November 1-0, and then an important 2-0 win over Nicaragua as Honduras drew to Costa Rica away 0-0. And this helped Haiti qualify for their first World Cup in 52 years. And Haiti got some ballers on their team, like Ricardo Ade, Duncan Nazon, their captain, Francis Pierrot, the number 10 Bellegarde, who committed roughly a year ago, I believe, etc. Additionally, Haiti have a lot of dual national potential too, that they might go after and recruit. Like Sunderland's Wilson Nasidor is a player that has been linked to a switch to Haiti. I'll say Maximin is a player that's also rumored to switch, even though he might not be Haitian. I still have no idea what's going on there. Then there's that striker Edouard, who has swerved Haiti in the past, but now might change his mind with the World Cup qualification, etc. I'm not the biggest fan of all the dual national switches, because where were you when Haiti was getting down and dirty in San Jose, Costa Rica, or at San Pedro Sula and Honduras? But these are some really talented players that would be hard to ignore, so I can't fault Haiti if they were to go and recruit them. Regardless, I think Haiti is just happy to be at the World Cup, and I can't blame them. I would be too if I was Haitian. I think that's an achievement in itself. So although I believe they could be somewhat competitive, I can't really say I think their ceiling is anything above the group stages. Sorry. But as a neutral, it would be kind of fire if Haiti proves me wrong. Let's now go over to Asia, where we're going to talk about Iran next. And man, recently, things are not looking good for Iran, huh? Iran topped their qualifying group containing the back-to-back Asian Cup champions Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and even the upcoming Asian side Uzbekistan. But the truth is, Iran did not play the greatest football. They did alright and honestly the bare minimum to win some of their games that allowed them to top the group. Some of their best players are on the come down too. Sardar Azmoun joined a club in the UAE to play with horses basically and collect a bag. Jahan Baksh didn't have a team for the longest time. He was a free agent. Mehdi Daremi, the best Iranian player, wasn't wanted by Inter Milan anymore, and now he's playing for Olympiacos over in Greece, which is not the most competitive league out there, etc. And I'm not too convinced by their manager Amir Galanoy either. I think with him leading the country on the sidelines has made Iran lose a lot of energy about them that we've seen in the past like at previous World Cups. Their best chance to make it out of the group for the first time ever was back in the 2022 World Cup where they didn't have a lot of energy. But my coach in the United States prevented that from happening. W freedom, man. What the fuck is a kilometer? And with Iran's record of not making it past the group stages, I don't really see that changing. The optimism around the Iranian national team is at an all-time low, and understandably so, which is why I have Iran in a group stage spot on my tier list as their ceiling. Maybe that's a hater take, because honestly I'm not the biggest Iranian football fan out there. Honestly, I'm an Iran hater. I remember their fans talking so much at the previous World Cup only to get dunked on by us, so that just left a salty taste in my mouth. Shout out to the Iranian women though, they bad as hell, no cap. Let's now move on to another Asian country that's qualified to the World Cup, a side that lost to Iran at the last Asian Cup actually, is Japan. And in my opinion, Japan is undoubtedly the best national team in Asia despite it being forever since they last won an Asian Cup. And they showed that in the Asian World Cup qualifiers, with them being the first country outside the host nations to qualify for the 2026 World Cup, as they finished on top of their group with 23 points, scoring 30 goals, and only conceding 3. And like I said, qualifying way before qualifying even ended, which is where their one loss came from, as they were playing the B team in that loss to Australia. However, it is important to note that during these qualifiers, although one of the times they played Saudi Arabia and the Australia loss I just mentioned, they played them after already qualifying, the previous 2 times they faced both teams, they couldn't beat them, which means that Japan still isn't being the best of the best when it comes to their own region. However, in recent friendlies, Japan seems to be winning against good teams again, as they went on to beat Brazil 3-2, beat Ghana 2-0, and beat Bolivia 3-0 most recently. And even though they lost in the United States most recently 2-0, they were playing their B team in that game to be fair. Also, Japan has some incredible pieces right now on their national team. They of course got my favorite Kaori Mitoma, while also having Wataru Endo, Daichi Kamada, Ritsu Doan, who's been doing good for Frankfurt so far this season, Junya Ito, Ayase Ueda, Takafusu Kubo of course, Zion Suzuki in net, Itakura, Keito Nakamura, Ao Tanaka, maybe Tomiyasu if he returns from his injury problems and finds a new club, of course Takumi Minamino, etc. Japan's depth is unreal, and some of their starting 11 players are really good too. One of my biggest problems with the Japan national team though is their manager Moriyasu, because for a while now, whenever the pressure is on him or Japan, he fails to totally set up Japan for success and they crumble. In the Asian Cup, that's what happened when they got eliminated in the quarterfinal, and at the previous 2022 World Cup, people are gonna remember that win against Germany and the dramatic win versus Spain to help them top the group. But that's when the pressure was not on Japan. When the pressure was on Japan against a Costa Rica side that got humiliated by Spain in the previous game 7-0, Japan lost 1-0. And when the pressure was on Japan to beat Croatia in the round of 16, they lost on penalties in embarrassing fashion. So Moriyasu hasn't proven that he can hang when the times get difficult. And I think that's Japan's weakness. But for me, Japan is still the best team in Asia. And honestly, might be the best national team outside of South America and Europe. And because I'm a Japanese simp and I still believe in this team so much, I'm gonna have a hot take and say that Japan's ceiling is the semifinals of the World Cup. Realistically, I feel like most people will have them in the quarterfinal section, but for me, I'm gonna be a bit biased and put Japan in the semifinal section because I believe they've got the pieces and the capability to be there. They can do it, I believe. They just gotta listen to everyone's Attack on Titan speech before the game and they'll make it that far. Trust.
My soldiers push forward! My soldiers scream out! My soldiers rage!
Now before we go on with the rest of the video, it is the halfway point. So I think it's a good time to remind you all to please subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate it and it means a lot, so thank you. And also if you guys can, follow my Twitter and my Instagram, both at Nabhuto, if you just want to hear my thoughts on football games, transfers, and overall just to get to know me more. And also make sure to join the Discord server, link in the description, and also follow me on Twitch. Live streams may be coming soon. So if you want to, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and follow me on my socials. Thank you. Alright, back to topic. We're gonna stick with Asia here, and let's talk about another debutant at the World Cup, just like Cape Verde and Curaçao beforehand. We've got Jordan, and the way that they balled out during the qualifiers has to be commended. Despite being put in a difficult group containing the likes of South Korea, Iraq, Palestine who have a pretty good offense, Oman who are defensively sound sometimes, etc., Jordan still managed to finish second place and qualify automatically to the World Cup for the first time in their history. And Jordan got some ballers, especially up top, man, with the likes of Altamari who plays in France, and of course Al Naima. If you don't follow Asian football, let me tell you that this guy is an absolute stud. I hope he balls out the World Cup so he can prove me right for praising him. However, in the recent friendlies for Jordan, they aren't looking the best. They drew with Mali 0-0, lost to Tunisia 3-2, conceding 3 to Tunisia is a little crazy, I'm not gonna lie, lost to Albania 4-2, and even lost to Bolivia 1-0 in their 4 more recent games outside of Asian opposition. So I would like to see Jordan do well at the World Cup. After all, there are the recent Asian Cup finalists, so they do have that dog in them. But I think these guys are just gonna be happy that they're at the World Cup in general. So for me, I got their ceiling being the group stages. Sorry. Moving on from that, let's go to the second host so far in this video that we're gonna discuss. We got Mexico. And my goodness, Mexico needs help. Desperately. Because recently, they have been cheeks. Ever since they won won the Gold Cup, where let's be honest, they were expected to win. The United States literally put out a B team once again. They've been awful. Before the Gold Cup, sure, they might have barely beaten Turkey 1-0, but they got clapped by Switzerland 4-2, and then post Gold Cup, they got a 0-0 draw against Japan, which isn't bad. Then they drew against South Korea 2-2, which also isn't the worst thing in the world. But then they got absolutely clapped 4-0 by Colombia. Holy guacamole, these guys got rinsed. Following that, they did get 2 draws, yes, but most recently, they lost to Paraguay 2-1. A side, by the way, where Mexico's arch rivals, USA, won 2-1 against, and also beat Uruguay 5-1-2. The same Uruguay that Mexico can only manage a 0-0 draw against. Also, the vibes surrounding the Mexican national team right now are at an all-time low. When they went back home to play in Mexico, for once, where they definitely should be playing more, it's literally their country. I don't know why they keep playing in the United States. Well, money is the reason. We all know why. They got booed out of the stadium in Mexico, and Edson Alvarez even jokingly said how nice it is to play at home. And remember, Mexico isn't playing their home group stage games in the United States to escape them from this reality. They're playing home in Mexico, so get used to it. Also, in my opinion, Mexico's completely relying on 2 players. One is Raul Jimenez. If he isn't performing, the Mexican national team is doomed, because the likes of Edson Alvarez and even their greatest talent at one point, Santi Jimenez, have fallen off, no lie. And they're also relying on the teenager Gilberto Mora, who's an absolute baller at such a young age, don't get me wrong, but relying on a 17-year-old to carry you is quite crazy. So for me, Mexico's quite lucky that they're one of the hosts of the World Cup, because from that, they're upon one side. Because if it weren't for that, I can see Mexico getting grouped at the World Cup again, despite the tournament expansion. But for now, I think Mexico can get out of the group and finish in a round 32 spot. That is my ceiling for these guys. They are awful, and as a USA fan, you love to see it. Let's now move on to a side that's actually been haunting my USA recently, and is probably the best football team in the African continent. It's Morocco. Morocco is on a serious come up right now. I think we all know about their 2022 World Cup story, where surprisingly to many, they topped their group containing Croatia, Belgium, and Canada, and then they made it all the way to the semifinals after defeating Spain in the round of 16 and Portugal in the quarterfinals, becoming the first African country to ever make the World Cup semifinals. And since then, you can argue that Morocco has only gone on and become better, not even just on the senior team level too, because their youth have been doing great as well, with Morocco actually just winning their first ever under 20 World Cup in the later stages of 2025. Back to the senior team level though, Morocco have definitely glowed up. Sure, they don't utilize the likes of Hakim Ziyech, Sofiane Boufal, their captain of the World Cup, Romain Saiss anymore, etc., but they got a bunch of other young talents coming through, like Shamsin Taubi, Ismail Sabari, Amir Richardson, Bilal El Khanous, who they didn't utilize at all at the previous World Cup, Elias Ben Sagir, Hamza Igamane, who's been a great super sub for Leo. Of course, Real Madrid's Brahim Diaz is finally representing Morocco, on top of the already existing talent that they got, like Yassine Bono, the goalkeeper, Youssef Nassiri, and now of course, Morocco's now captain and the best right back in the world, Achraf Hakimi, etc. So for me, Morocco are even a better side now than they were at the previous 2022 World Cup, and they do have the potential to make another very deep run. However, I do want to see how they perform at the AFCON that they're hosting and see whether they can win their second ever AFCON, because they're the massive favorites at this competition. So as long as they don't face their kryptonite South Africa, because if they don't, they should be expected to win the AFCON. So maybe my ranking will change post AFCON depending on how they perform, but for now, I want to say that Morocco's ceiling is going to be where they finished last time. I got them at a semi-final spot. I might be overrating them a tad bit, but I believe in this side, so let's see what they can do. Let's now go back to Europe, where we're going to finally talk about the Netherlands, a side who has made 3 World Cup finals and has never won a single one. Ouch. Now, the Netherlands have had a pretty comfortable qualifying campaign. Even though they have Poland in their group, who they were unable to beat both times they faced each other, the Dutch still finished on top of the group, where they scored 27 goals, only allowed 4 against them, 2 of them being from the Polish, and had 0 losses throughout the entirety of their qualifying campaign. And the Netherlands team is stacked on paper. They of course now got their top goal scorer in history, Memphis Depay, Cody Gakpo, Xabi Simons, Frankie de Jong, Jeremy Frimpong, Daniel Malen, one of the most informed fullbacks in the world right now is Julian Timber, Denzel Dumfries, Tijani Reinders, a very good midfielder, their captain and their best center back ever in my eyes, Virgil van Dijk, etc. So on paper, the Netherlands are a very proper side. I think the one major thing that's holding the Dutch back though is their manager Ronald Koeman. Look, he's not the worst manager in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just that the Dutch aren't playing up to their full potential in my eyes, with Koeman as their manager. And you can see that in qualifying. Against their only decent opponent in their group, they couldn't defeat the Polish not even once. So although I do think the Netherlands are a good side, I don't think they'll have the cojones to go all the way. And in fact, I got their ceiling where they finished the last time out in 2022, the quarterfinals. I can't really see the Dutch going further than that, sorry. Let's now talk about the only country from the Oceania region at the World Cup, and respectfully, probably the only one that's gonna make it, because New Caledonia are not gonna make the World Cup, let's be serious. We got New Zealand, and fun fact for y'all, New Zealand are the only national team that has an undefeated record at the World Cup without winning it. That's right, in 2010, they drew every single game. So shout out to New Zealand. That's a pretty solid achievement, I suppose. Like going back to New Zealand's form, I mean their qualifiers were an absolute cakewalk. I think for the rest of the time, New Zealand is going to be making every single World Cup, because they dog walk all over the Oceanic qualifiers. And I mean they do have some solid players, like Chris Chris Wood, who was actually at the previous 2010 World Cup. This man loves scoring in the Premier League now, by the way. Everybody knows him by now. And they also got my brown brother Sarpreet Singh, so shout out to my guy. I hope he gets called up for the World Cup, etc. See, New Zealand is not that bad. And also, I gotta respect New Zealand for actually scheduling tough friendlies ahead of the World Cup. They're doing the best job they can at preparing themselves. But New Zealand are gonna get knocked out in the group stages and spend the rest of the tournament chilling at Disney World in Florida or some shit. Let's be very real, man. Their ceiling is the group stages, and anything further than that would be an absolute miracle. I heard New Zealand is a beautiful place though. I definitely gotta visit someday for sure. Let's now go back to Europe and talk about one of the underdogs of the 2026 World Cup, according to many. It's Norway, the side who qualified for the first World Cup since 1998. So it's been 28 years that Norway has been at the world stage. And this is the first international tournament where Erling Haaland will participate for the Norwegian national team. So that's exciting. During the qualifiers, Norway played extremely well in a decently tough group where they had Israel, EU, and Italy in their group. And Norway still managed to win all 8 games that they played, scoring 37 goals, which is simply ridiculous. They were averaging 4.63 goals per game, while only conceding 5 goals throughout the entire qualifiers. They also owned Italy 7-1 on aggregate. Brazil fans have now just been traumatized from me saying that result out loud, I can't lie. Anyways, Norway are a very talented team. Of course, we all know they debatably have the best striker in the world right now in Erling Haaland, and they also have the playmaker Martin Odegaard, but they still have the likes of Ryerson, Sorloth, Antonio Nusa, Oscar Bob, etc. And depending on whether they get a favorable group or not, they can go far at the World Cup. And to be honest, even with a non-favorable group, they can still go pretty far in my eyes. I actually went on a date recently with this girl who actually has incredible ball knowledge, and her hottest take is she believes that Norway can make the semifinals of the World Cup. I really hope she's not watching this video though, because I do have a fat crush on her, I'm not gonna lie. But I can't really agree with her on that take. However, I do believe Norway has the capabilities of going to a quarterfinal at the World Cup, which is where I have their ceiling place as on my tier list. And if they make it that far, that would be a very successful World Cup if I do say so myself. Let's now move on to a North American side that has just qualified to only their second ever World Cup. We got Panama. And Panama is alright for CONCACAF standards in my opinion. They were definitely the best remaining team in CONCACAF qualifying. After all, they did make the CONCACAF Nations League final and also a Gold Cup final in recent memory. And they have dunked on the United States 3 times in a row in competitive matches, which is why I'm also a Panama hater. But despite them being a little bit shaky, they still finished on top of their qualifying group to make the World Cup. And even though they remain undefeated, they did draw 3 times to the likes of Suriname, Guatemala, and El Salvador in their group, which is just kind of shocking. And Panama do have some ballers, like Murillo in the back line, Coco Carrasquilla in the midfield, etc. And their coach, Thomas Christensen, is one of the most underrated and best coaches in North America. But for me, judging their recent World Cup performances back in 2018, when the lights were the brightest, everybody found out that Panama were just there for the vibes. And although I don't think that mentality will be there at the 2026 World Cup, where they're just happy to be there, I do think Panama's ceiling is the group stages itself, and anything above that would be an absolute miracle. Maybe I'm being biased because I am a Panama hater, as I mentioned before. I mean, can you blame me? They've owned my country 3 times already, but that's their ceiling in my eyes. Moving on from a North American side to a South American one now, let's talk about Paraguay, who have qualified to their first World Cup since 2010 when they made the quarterfinals after beating Japan on penalties. One of the most heartbreaking moments for Japan, I can't lie. Anyways, Paraguay have been one of the best sides in South America as of late. Yes, although they did take the last automatic ticket to the 2026 World Cup in the Colombo qualifying standings, they had the same amount of points as 3rd place Colombia, just a lower goal difference from anyone between 3rd and 5th place. Also, in these qualifiers, they ended up beating Argentina once and even beat Brazil once, which just shows that they're a quality side. And that makes sense because they've got some good players, like Miguel Almiron, of course, who's one of Paraguay's most notable players for many years now, Diego Gomez, the upcoming Paraguayan star in the Premier League, Julio Enciso, who although had injury issues in the Premier League, he always balls out for Paraguay and is one of their most important pieces, and they even have a top manager who helped turn around Paraguay's form completely, Gustavo Alfaro, etc. However, Paraguay's friendlies have been meh. Sure, they ended up drawing Japan and ended up beating Mexico in their most recent friendly, but they lost to South Korea 2-0 and also the United States 2-1 in the recent international window. So although Paraguay is a pretty solid side and they could definitely make it out of their group, I can't really see them making that big of a deep run at the World Cup like they did in 2010. So with that being said, I got Paraguay ceiling being the round 16. I think they're slightly a level above the round 32, but not quite quarterfinal level. I said what I said. Now moving on to a side who are one of the favorites to win their first ever World Cup is Portugal. Don't listen to Cristiano Ronaldo and his nonsense that winning the World Cup is not a dream for him. It definitely is, and he's just coping due to the fact that Messi won the World Cup back in 2022. Also, it is important to note that Cristiano Ronaldo will not be suspended for the opening group stage games of the World Cup after his red card with Ireland. Low-key, it is a little corrupt. He should be suspended for those games, but I'll take it because I do want to see Ronaldo play at the World Cup. So W corruption, I guess. Anyways, as I mentioned, Portugal are definitely one of the favorites to go all the way at this World Cup. They did alright in the qualifiers, top of their group, but they did have that one loss to Ireland which shocked everybody. And that loss helped Ireland go to the UEFA playoffs, so there's that. However, Portugal is absolutely stacked on paper. I already mentioned Cristiano Ronaldo, but they also have the likes of João Felix, who's been balling out for Al Nassr, Ruben Diaz, Rafael Leao, Bruno Fernandes, João Neves, Vitinha. Wow, that midfield is stacked. Nuno Mendes, the best left back in the world, Bernardo Silva, Gonçalo Ramos, Carlos Forbes, Gonçalo Inácio, Francisco Conceição, etc. Portugal are looking good, and I bet they even have extra motivation to do well too, with them probably going to be trying their hardest to win the World Cup in Diego Jota's honor as well. However, their manager manager is probably my weak point, Roberto Martinez. He underperformed with that Belgian golden generation. So who says that he can take this Portugal golden generation and go all the way with them? However, even though I am criticizing their manager, I still got Portugal on the highest tier on my tier list alongside Argentina, England, and France. Because they definitely have the potential to win this World Cup. Maybe Ronaldo can finally win the World Cup and admit that it was his dream all along. Who knows? Let's now move on to the back-to-back Asian Cup champions, Qatar. And wow, Qatar low-key stinks. Not only were they the worst host in World Cup history statistically wise, but they also had a pretty mediocre qualifying campaign. We're in a group with UAE, Iran, and Uzbekistan. They finished 4th place and squeezed by to the 4th round of Asian qualifying, where they would controversially get lucky with them hosting their group in the 4th round and having the biggest break between their first and second game. And this ultimately helped them top the group with the UAE and Oman in it, where they beat the UAE with 2 set pieces. Even one of their better players in Almoz Ali is low-key washed nowadays, and their manager Julian Lopetegui is a good manager, but there's only so much you can do with the mediocre pieces on the national team. Their one hope is Akram Afif. It's literally Akram Afif and inshallah. That's Qatar's entire game plan. But there's only so much Afif can do when you're playing some of the best national teams in the world. So for me, Qatar is an easy group stage ceiling for me. I find it impossible that they can make it further than that. Let's now move on to a Middle East neighbor of Qatar, Saudi Arabia. Now we all remember Saudi Arabia at the last World Cup, but although they failed to progress from the group, they provided a shock at the tournament with them beating the later champions Argentina 2-1 in the opening game. Fun fact, I was actually at that game. That was insane indeed. Just like Qatar though, Saudi Arabia failed to secure an automatic World Cup ticket in the 3rd round, so they had to go to the 4th round where they controversially got lucky as they got to host their group and be provided with all the benefits that come with that. And they eventually topped their group to qualify for the World Cup. But make no mistake, Saudi Arabia got pretty lucky. And although I do rate them slightly higher than Qatar right now, I don't think Saudi Arabia can do much at this tournament if I'm keeping it real. However, with Hrvizak at the wheel, you'll never know. He's gonna have all those milks at the stadium watching him instead of the game. I can tell you that for a fact. But for me, I'm also gonna have Saudi Arabia as a group stage ceiling. I know I put way too many teams at this tier and one of these guys at least is gonna make it out of the group, but this is not a prediction video. This is just a tier list on where I see every team ceiling as. So I don't really care if I'm wrong. I'm just telling you what I think about these teams. So yeah, just wanted to explain myself. Anyways, let's now move on to a side that has surprisingly qualified to the World Cup. We got Scotland, who have qualified to their first World Cup since 1998, the same as Austria and Norway. So congrats to all the Scottish people out there. Y'all deserve it. I've also never seen my buddy Max claim his Scottish side so fast once they qualified for the World Cup. That is crazy. Anyways though, Scotland qualified to the World Cup automatically from a pretty difficult qualifying group, containing the likes of Greece and even Denmark, where Denmark completely fumbled by joining Belarus 2-2 at home, and then losing to Scotland 4-2 in Glasgow, where Tierney and later McLean scored 2 last-minute goals to secure Scotland a World Cup ticket that they definitely deserve. And honestly, I'm rocking with the Scotland hype, man. They got some ballers on their team that can do something special. They got McGinn, Andy Robertson, Tierney, like I said, Scott McTominay, of course, the Serie A MVP award winner from last season, etc. Their striker situation is a bit dull, which is why I can't see them going that far in the World Cup, but I think they could definitely make it out of their group. So with that being said, I'm gonna have Scotland at the round 32 tier. They're not one of the best sides out there, but like I said, they're more than good enough to make it out of this group. Let's now move on to an African powerhouse lately, Senegal. And my goodness, are these guys good. Despite most of their key players throughout this generation chasing a bag in Saudi Arabia now, like Edouard Mendy dipping to Al Ali, Koulibaly dipping to Al Hilal, and Sadio Mane dipping to Al Nassr, these guys are still a good national team. In qualifying, they had a pretty difficult-ish group with DR Congo and Sudan. And for the longest time, it seemed like DR Congo could actually take that automatic qualifying spot from Senegal, with Senegal drawing way more games than they should have. And in the all-important match between these two sides, DR Congo was up 2-0. But Senegal locked the hell in and came back to win that game 3-2 and secured an automatic spot to the World Cup. Their new manager, Papa Diaw, has got Senegal playing some really great football. And when you got great players like a Sadio Mane, who wasn't at the 2022 World Cup due to injury, and Edouard Mendy, a Koulibaly, and then the likes of Ismail Sarr, Iliman Ndiaye, Idrissa Gueye, Nicholas Jackson, Pami Matar Sarr, Ibrahim Mbaye, Lamine Camara, Assane Diao, etc., you could definitely make a good run at the World Cup with those players. So with all that being said, I'm gonna have to put Senegal in the quarterfinal tier. I think that's their ceiling. I think a lot of things would have to go their way in terms of opponents that they face to get that far. But I think their ceiling is definitely that quarterfinal tier. Now from one African side to another, we're gonna go to South Africa, who are participating at the World Cup for the first time since the 2010 one that they hosted. And they definitely most deserve to be in the 2026 one. Despite being put in a group with the likes of Nigeria and Benin, and also despite facing a 3-point deduction for fielding an ineligible player that should have been suspended for that match against Lesotho, South Africa qualified above everybody and qualified to the World Cup. It wasn't the most convincing, but hey, at least they qualified. Look at you, Nigeria. Y'all need to take some notes from Bafana. Now yes, if you look at South Africa's roster, you might not know any of the names in that squad sheet because all these guys play in South Africa. But trust me, these guys are an absolute unit together. So for me, I'm gonna have to put South Africa in the round 32 tier. I want to see how good these guys actually are at the AFCON, but I can definitely see them making it out of the group. Going further than the round 32 might be a stretch, but I'll make my final judgments after the AFCON. From one South to another, let's talk about South Korea next. Their qualifying campaign went pretty decent in my opinion. They finished on top of the group with Jordan and Iraq and qualified to the tournament automatically. However, there are some issues with the South Korean team. First, their main player Heung-min Son is a little too old now, and he can't really go back-to-back 90-minute games anymore, or at least that's how it was in the friendlies recently. He also plays in the MLS, so he'll have no games from now until late February/early March, which isn't ideal. Also without Hwang In-byum in the midfield, South Korea are genuinely cooked. He's such an essential piece of the South Korean team that everybody who likes South Korea needs to pray to the heavens that he's fully fit for the tournament. And one of their best strikers, Hwang Hee-chan, the striker who scored against Portugal to send the Koreans through to the round 16 in 2022, has been awful this past season for Wolves. Even one of their most talented players, Lee Kang-in, doesn't play as much for PSG as he would like to, which harms South Korea. However, the recent friendlies have been pretty good. They beat the US 2-0, drew to Mexico 2-2, beat Paraguay 2-0, beat Bolivia 2-0, and beat Ghana 1-0. However, they did get clapped by Brazil 5-0 at home. But overall, South Korea have been pretty alright in these friendlies. So for me, I think their ceiling is round 16. They can get past the group stages, and if they get lucky, they can win their round 32 game. But round 16 for me is South Korea's maximum. However, if South Korea don't have Hwang In-byum, these guys might get grouped, no troll. Now let's go back to Europe and talk about the 2024 Euro champion, Spain. These lot are simply incredible. They pretty much easily topped their qualifying group, containing the likes of Turkey and Georgia, and even slapped out Turkey 6-0 away from home one time. And they did most of their qualifying campaign without their main superstar Lamine Yamal, which just shows how impressive they are. Additionally, just look at Luis de la Fuente's squad that he has at his disposal. He's got Yamal, as I mentioned already, Dean Huijsen, Pedri, Mikel Merino, Marco Correa, Mikel Oyarzabal, Ferran Torres, David Raya, Dani Olmo, Ballon d'Or winner Rodri, Gavi, who gets fit again, Zubamendi, Americo Laporte, Pau Cubarsí, Yeremy Pino, Robin Lenormand, Fabio Ruiz, Fermin Lopez, Alejandro Grimaldo, etc. Spain are so stacked and they are so good. So for me, this is an obvious final tier list placement. They are one of the favorites to win this World Cup, and understandably so. Spain is insanely good. That finalissima in March against Argentina is going to be fire, and we're going to learn a lot from that game too, so I cannot wait for that one. We will be there no matter what. Now let's move on to a colder side in Europe, where we're going to go over Switzerland. And Switzerland are just the old reliable. They always do pretty well in international tournaments. For the qualifiers though, they definitely had one of the most difficult groups containing the likes of Kosovo, Slovenia, and a very talented Sweden side. As Switzerland still finished on top of the group pretty convincingly, remaining undefeated and only conceded 2 goals in 6 games. An absolutely incredible achievement by Switzerland. And these guys are good not only defensively, but also going forward. They lost Xherdan Shaqiri, who retired from the national team, which is a real shame. I believe he can still provide something for the Swiss, but they still got their captain and number 10 Granit Xhaka, Breel Embolo, their main striker, Manzabi, who's come out of nowhere and is continuously scoring goals for the Swiss, Ruben Vargas, Dan Ndoye, etc. I really like Switzerland, man. They can go toe to toe with anybody, and they can definitely do their usual kind of deep runs in the World Cup. In fact, I think Switzerland can go further than they ever had before in recent times, and I'm going to say that their ceiling is the quarterfinals. They usually always make the round 16 to get eliminated, but this time I do believe they have the capabilities of making a World Cup quarterfinal. Let's see if they do it though. Let's now move a bit south and go back to Africa, where we're going to be talking about Tunisia. Now respectfully to Tunisia, I mean they're just a pretty boring side, let's just be honest. They never provide any sort of proper footballing entertainment whatsoever. However, in Africa, they're definitely efficient, because in their group that they finished on top of, they remained undefeated, didn't concede a single goal throughout the entire qualifiers, and scored 22 goals. However, that's just in Africa. I think outside of Africa, Tunisia have proved time and time again that they don't got it like that. They've never progressed from the group stages at a World Cup, which just shows me that they've never been a side capable of doing something special at the World Cup. We'll learn a lot more about them at the AFCON, but for now, I'll put Tunisia at the round 32. I think that their defense will prove to be good enough in the group stages, but once we get to the knockout rounds, it'll be difficult for Tunisia. Hence why I have their ceiling at the round 32 for now. We'll see what happens with them though. Let's now move on to the country that I support, the main host of the World Cup, the United States of America. Now, if you asked me about them a few months ago, I would tell you that the US was absolutely cooked, and we might have had a round of 32 ceiling. Because respectfully as a pot one side, we were never going to get grouped at the World Cup, despite what some fans were saying. However, the later stages of 2025 under Mauricio Pochettino were low-key showing that we're back in business, baby. Ever since we moved to that back 5, we beat Japan's B team 2-0, drew with a very good defensive side Ecuador 1-1, ended up beating Australia from 1-0 down and beat them 2-1, beat a very good Paraguay side 2-1, and then slapped the living hell out of Uruguay 5-1. We've been undefeated in the past 5 games, winning 4 of those games and drawing 1 against top 40 FIFA ranked opponents. We're low-key going off right now, and we haven't played with the likes of Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie, Tyler Adams, Anthony Robinson, etc. for most of these games, so we can still be even better. We've been doing so good, in fact, that I had to make a personal USMNT video talking about how we're back and how good we have been as of late. So the optimism right now is at an all-time high for the USMNT, which is rare for us. It's been depressing for too long now, so maybe I'm riding on the coattails of the hype, but I'm putting the United States ceiling as a quarterfinals. We can do it, guys. We can definitely make a quarterfinal if things go our way, which is why I'm ranking us that high. Come on, USA, let's go, baby. Now let's move on to a side that just got their asses manhandled by the USA. It's Uruguay. It seems like Marcelo Bielsa's losing the locker room, man. He started off hot with Uruguay, where they beat the likes of Argentina and Buenos Aires, etc. However, in the big 2025, Uruguay had been awful. I mean, you could not draw to Mexico and get slapped up by the United States 5-1. That just cannot happen if you're Uruguay. The one redeeming factor is they didn't have their 2 best players in my opinion, in Federico Valverde, of course, and Darwin Nunez. Even though he's not at Liverpool anymore and he's over there in Saudi Arabia collecting a bag. But still, things are not looking good for Uruguay right now. For the sake of their history, I'm gonna put Uruguay in the round 16 for now, but I might downgrade them depending on how good they do in March. We'll find out soon enough though. And we're finally at Uzbekistan, who are making their debuts at the World Cup in the summer of 2026. And Uzbekistan are a rising powerhouse in Asia, and they've got some proper ballers, like Fazulayev, who's playing in Turkey right now. He's very good at dribbling, the striker Shamurodov, then the center back who plays for Man City, Kusanov, etc. Uzbekistan have a good team. The one concerning thing I do have to say about them is them hiring Cannavaro, a great defender of course during his time, but as a manager, he's proven that he's not really that good, and yet they hired him to take over Uzbekistan at the World Cup. I'm not the most convinced by the hiring, but it is what it is. At least Timur Kapadze is still there as an assistant manager. Uzbekistan did do well in the qualifiers though, and they're doing well in the friendlies, like beating Kuwait 2-0, beating Egypt 2-0, and beating Iran on penalties. I think Uzbekistan can be a surprise package, and a lot of football fans are sleeping on them, so I think they can catch some teams by surprise and could make a round 32, which is their ceiling, but I don't really see them going further than that. I like Uzbekistan though, and I hope they can do something crazy at the tournament, unless they play USA, then I gotta root against y'all. Anyways, this is how my rankings tier list of already qualified 2026 World Cup teams looks like. Do y'all agree or disagree with my takes? Let me know what y'all think in the comments down below. And this was a long video and took a long time to make, so if you guys enjoyed this one and want to see more videos like this, please remember to subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it, and please be sure to follow my Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and join the Discord community. All the links are in my YouTube description. And last but not least, if you want to learn more about how the United States are back, you definitely want to check out this video right here. You won't regret it.